Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to First and Short, your first place to get short bits of college football news and analysis. Today is November 9th, Sunday, week 11 just wrapped up. I'm here with my co-host Aaron, and I am Mashfik. Before we get started and talk about how Indiana was able to grasp a win out of the clutches of defeat and talk about how Oregon was able to win a muddy, slow game in Iowa. Just want to say, man, guys, please subscribe. Please follow us. Our channel is growing a lot. We see our podcast, the streams are going up on there as well. So just want to say, continue to follow us, continue to, hey, share it with your mom, share it with your dad, share it with somebody who wants to watch college football stuff, but doesn't necessarily have the time to. Our episodes are only 30 to 40 minutes. So, not too big of an ask there. So, Aaron, I know you just came back from the Alabama game, Alabama versus LSU. Excited to talk about that as well. We're going to talk about some AP top 25 stuff first. What changes do we think we're going to see in the CFP bracket based on how the AP top 25 came out earlier today. And we're going to highlight a few games. So based on our picks from the last episode, Aaron, you got 9 of 11. Good job. You missed on the Northwestern game against USC. I got 8 out of 11. I got a little too aggressive thinking Syracuse and Iowa would be able to get an upset. Iowa almost did it though. And we were both wrong on Virginia, but Chandler Morris, the quarterback at Virginia, he got hurt during the game, so that one was kind of hard to predict. Obviously, Virginia's offense fell pretty flat after that. So, Aaron, I'm excited to hear about your trip. I know you just got back. Let's start with your experience with LSU at Alabama. How was the game day experience there in Tuscaloosa?
Absolutely, yeah. Tuscaloosa was amazing, man. We got down to downtown and the area and everything. We were going to different restaurants and bars. We walked past the strip and we just gradually made it closer and closer to the stadium, and you could just feel the energy. Like, I've been to SEC games before, and I've been to different stadiums, throughout the Southeast, but I have to tip my cap to the Crimson Tide, man. Like, it has to be one of the best game day experiences I have. Hopefully we can put some B-roll in here later,
Yep,
but yeah, it
that's
was a great time, and
that's
we got a pretty good game.
You got to what? You got to see a pretty good game. Yep.
Yeah.
Before we get into that breakdown, I noticed, I was sitting on my couch watching TV, but you were out and about. But I noticed a trend with a few SEC quarterbacks yesterday. I don't know if you happen to notice anything. Did you notice a common theme across a few teams regarding SEC quarterbacks?
Yeah. So I was able to step in and watch a couple of games throughout the day as we were making our way closer to, Bryant Denny Stadium. One thing that I did notice, I think we're talking about the same thing here. We saw those teams that have been struggling throughout the year, right?
Yeah.
They were starting to change things up and essentially try out different players in the position of quarterback.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah, you saw Nussmeier. He got benched late in the third or early in the fourth, I think. DJ Lagway, he was benched as they were slowly being murdered by Kentucky. They lost 38-7, I believe. He had 3 interceptions, and then freshman Tramel Jones came in for him. The Mississippi State game, Kamario Taylor, he came in for Blake Shapen. But yeah, I guess we're at that point in the season where it's like, all right, let's get started on next season. Let's kind of giving up on the guy who's kind of was at the helm of our destruction up until this point. Let's see what the new guy can do. But yeah, that's just something I noticed. Curious, don't typically see that in the SEC all the time, but that's kind of where we're at right now. Tell us more about the Alabama game. What did you see in that game?
Sure. So at a high level, statistic analysis, right? Alabama held LSU to 0 touchdowns and only 232 yards. This is the first time LSU has been, held and failed to score a touchdown against any opponent since 2012 in the national championship game they played in. Guess who they played in that game?
I wonder. Same guys.
Yep, same guys. So yeah, there were plenty of stars on the Alabama defensive side that just suffocated the Tigers and held them to just 9 points. With, I think, there were 4 trips to the red zone. So talk about the defense that knows how to stand up when their back is against the wall, right? Every time, I wish you had a chance, to just get back in the game. The Tide defense, they landed and they shut the door, right? They forced 3 field goals and a turnover every single time in the red zone. So, like I said, they stood tall with their backs up against the wall. You know, you mentioned Nussmeier being benched for Michael Van Buren. That was Frank Wilson's desperate attempt to inject some, mobility and variety into the offense. I was being suffocated by that team, right? I mean, and it worked at times, but that offensive line for LSU is just so anemic, right?
Yeah.
They were severely hampered by the fact that they just couldn't run the ball. I do want to give a shout out to Michael Van Buren. That the RPO. I mean, I wish they would have went through this trial and error earlier. It seemed like
Hmm.
there were some glimpses of success that took place there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, to be fair, Alabama, they couldn't run the ball that much either anyway, right? So I mean, neither side really had just a dynamic and explosive run game. So you just saw the team that was able to execute in the pass game better win the game.
Yeah. On TV, it like I know the score is 20-9. It felt closer than that. Like it felt like LSU was just like right there, but they just kept shooting themselves in the foot each and every time, and it led to the result that we saw on TV. Michael Van
Yeah,
Buren, I believe he was at Mississippi State last year. I remember he gave UGA some trouble, being as mobile as he is.
yeah.
It was either last year or a year before, but yeah. Cool. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed. Glad you made it back home safely. And I know
Mhm.
you wore your UGA shirt, so I'm glad they didn't rip you apart or anything like that out there.
Made very neutral, but hey, they were very hospitable, and I had a good time.
That's good. Good to hear.
Yep.
Good to hear. All right, let's move on into the AP Top 25 for Week 12. I'm not going to go through all 25, but I just want to talk about a couple of the big movers. I saw
Mhm.
Texas moved up quite a bit, even though they had a bye week. BYU obviously lost that game against Texas Tech. We'll talk about that later. Louisville and Virginia, they were big droppers as well in the ACC. So, Aaron, just looking at this list, I think the top 6 or 7 didn't change much. Top 8 really
Mhm.
didn't change much. But what sticks out to you what sticks out to you on this list that we think will help shape the CFP bracket later this week?
On this list, I don't know if you noticed, but Memphis is no longer on there.
Hmm.
They lost to Tulane last week, so maybe at this point they're out of the college football playoff talks, right? So right now you have James Madison and South Florida. Those seems to be the teams that possibly have the chance to get in now and be that Greater Five, outright team that gets in.
Yep.
And Byron Brown, and the South Florida Bulls, they they look like the G5 team to make it earlier this year. So now they're
Hmm.
slowly making their way back into those talks with Memphis out of the picture.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing I noticed, with BYU's loss, you wonder if they still have a solid foothold on that, second Big 12 spot in the college football playoffs. It's their first loss of the year, so I mean,
Yeah.
seems like they should, but it just all comes down to those
Yeah.
different,
It,
metrics that the committee looks at, right?
Yeah, it kind of opens the door for maybe a Utah. I think Utah has lost to both of them already, but BYU could have a harder test coming up, and you don't know how the thing ends, the season ends. But now that BYU has that loss, it kind of opens things up for maybe one or two more teams in the BYU, or sorry, in the Big 12.
Yeah, and then still got a conference championship game to play. Somebody
Yep.
has to play at some point in time, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, another thing I noticed, Texas, they somehow jumped 3 spots during their bye week, and they make it back into the top 10. Wow, going to be interesting. The road is not clear ahead. They have some
Yeah.
storms they have to weather. So we'll talk about that later. Um, Hey, Georgia Tech, they are back in the top ACC spot after Virginia. They stumble 8 spots, right? And Louisville, they lost in overtime. I think they're ranked 15. They've stumbled down to I believe 19 now. So um, yeah, it's chaos,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Chaos
Georgia
occurred in the
Tech
week.
is back in there, and look, that's who we thought is gonna make it originally. So that works out in favor for us. Yeah, those are good notes. Those are definitely some things I noticed as well. So interested to see what that list looks like on Tuesday night. Let's get into some games. I think Friday night we had Northwestern at number 19 USC. The final score was 17-38. Shout out to Fetty Wap. Aaron, you had this in the first half. You picked Northwestern on this one. Game was tied 14-14 in the second quarter before USC went on a 24-3 run. Northwestern, they were doing what a team has to do that can't hang offensively. They were grinding away the clock. They were making long drives, and they were shrinking the game. The first quarter only had one possession for each team. Like, I think USC started with the ball, then Northwestern had the ball. That was it. That was the first quarter. Third quarter, Northwestern had the ball twice, USC once. So, like, throughout different parts of the game, they were doing what needed to be done in order to win. It just kind of the floodgates opened at certain points in that second half. The Northwestern running back, Caleb Komolafe, he was a workhorse on Friday night, and you have to be to kind of drip that clock, right? 118 yards on 17 attempts. He ran right through USC's, biggest weakness. I wanted to highlight that. The Trojans came into the game ranking near the bottom nationally in defending the run. That's kind of been the story on Lincoln Riley's USC teams in the past couple of years. And, Komolafe, he proved it. He averaged nearly 7 yards every time he touched the ball on the ground. And, at the end of the day, though, Northwestern's inability to consistently convert on third down, I think they went 4 for 10 for the game. That meant that the Trojans' top-ranked offense still got the ball back with way too much time to play with, which led to kind of like that disparity in the final score. With that time, speaking of, USC destroyed Northwestern through the air. USC had 309 passing yards, and outgained Northwestern total offense by over 200 yards, 482 to 280. So big discrepancy in terms of offense. Jada Maeva, he had 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. His favorite target, you might have heard of him, Makai Lemon. His favorite target, as usual, 11 receptions, 161 yards, 1 touchdown. He scored on a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown. So just a great connection there. Shout out to USC. They were able to get a big win.
Nice, nice. Next deep dive we can talk about number 2, Indiana. You know, being in an absolute thriller at Penn State. They came away with the win, 27-24. Mash, was this game closer than you thought it would be?
I mean, I wasn't surprised that much, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've been saying this for the last couple of weeks. Penn State fired their head coach, but they still have all their athletes. They lost Drew Aller, but we've said what we've said about what kind of quarterback he is, right? Grunkmeyer has a similar Drew Aller and Grunkmeyer in this, throughout their career this year, they have a similar completion percentage, and neither of them throw it that much anyway compared to an average FBS team. So that's just a lift and shift, like same player. So with the athletes that Penn State still has, I'm not entirely too surprised that this was the outcome of the game, how close it was.
Yeah. But then again, Penn State was Penn State, in those big games, they fall short and they can't figure out how to close the door. So,
Yeah,
I mean, you could almost make the argument that this is the same outcome that would have happened if they had James Franklin coaching on the sideline, right? This is what we've seen him for the past
I don't disagree.
7, 8, 9, 10 years. Um, but yeah, you could just say, Penn State, they get to save $8.5 million a year now and get the same result. So
Yeah, great value.
still, depending on how you want to look at it, right?
Yeah, right.
Um, but I will say this game also, it featured one of the greatest comeback drives that I've ever seen, right? First of
Mm-hmm.
all, Penn State, they were down 10 points to start the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Through some great defense and some opportunistic takeaways and some excellent running by Penn State's Nick Singleton, they were able to take the lead with 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
Yep, I was texting you
And,
that. Yep,
yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to go somewhere and find a TV.
right,
Luckily, we were in a football town, so everybody was watching the game, trying
right.
to see if that was going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
You get to that point and you're like, okay, now Indiana, they have 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes actually, to score a touchdown, right? A field goal won't do it. And not only do you have that, their first play is a sack on that drive, right? And they lost 7 yards on it. And so now You have to start about on your own 13-yard line. Mendoza, then he starts down a warpath down the field. He's making multiple passes to Charlie Becker, Omar Cooper, Junior or Omar Cooper Jr., EJ Williams, etc. Right. Um, and then, of course, he passes to Omar Cooper Jr. in the end zone, where to me it seemed like there was, it was kind of a throwaway pass, right?
Hmm.
But also, it was like Omar Cooper Jr. would have only been able to get it if possible if he put both feet down, which is crazy. It was like it was just a crazy scene of events in real time to see happen. Um,
It
it
didn't
looked
look
like
like a
he,
catch it didn't look like a catch in real time, but they slowed it down.
yeah,
Between Gus Johnson's aneurysms, you could kind of see. Oh, it was like, oh wow, that was impressive. 2 feet down, NFL touchdown,
mhm.
as they were saying. Yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very impressive. Yeah. After this game, I mean, Mendoza, he totally deserves, Heisman credibility after leading his team back in a moment like this on the road against Penn State. Kept his composure all the way through on a clutch moment and a clutch drive like that, right?
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I mean, with Penn State, we mentioned, what they would have to do and what worked for them in the first half against Ohio State, and to expand over that, over the course of the entire game in order to win against an Indiana team that seemed almost unstoppable in offense and ranked, 3 or 4 in almost every single defensive statistic, right? Penn State, they managed to match Indiana in almost every team stat. I
Mm.
mean, they had 10 more total yards than them, but they had very similar passing yards, very similar rushing yards, and very similar rush yards per attempt, right?
Hmm.
Um, in the first half of the Ohio State game, they were +1 in the turnover margin, and in this game, they were +1 in the turnover margin over, Indiana.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, their best players, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, right? They had to be on point and be the engine of the offense the whole game.
Yep.
In both games, Katron Allen, he had a rushing touchdown in both games, and then in both games, Nick Singleton, he had, I believe, 130 yards of all-purpose yards.
Hmm.
So pretty effective from the people that you want to produce and contribute for the offense, right? But just at the end of the day, no matter how many athletes you have on your squad on the field for you, uh, one team has championship mentality and one doesn't. And
Hmm.
today, was Indiana University. Shout out to Kurt Signetti for still, for instilling into those players how to win, and be relevant in program and you know, no matter what I guess your status quo of your university is, he's making a new status quo for Indiana right now.
For
I mean,
sure. Yeah.
he's turning them into a powerhouse that, you know, people are gonna think twice when they come up on the schedule now. I said it last year and I'll say it again. You know, a lot of people thought, this Indiana team was just gonna be a one and done fluke type of.
I said that. We said that.
We said that, but hey, they are proving us wrong. They're proving that they're here to stay over and over again.
Hmm.
So, with that being said, Indiana, they have Wisconsin and Purdue left on the schedule. I would go ahead and, book a trip for them to Indianapolis to the Big Ten conference championship game. And then I would probably go ahead and book potentially a first round bye because, win or loss in that game, probably against Ohio State, if it's close enough, I don't see you moving out of the top four.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Great resume so far.
Mhm.
Awesome. All right, moving along. Number 5, UGA at Mississippi State. Man, UGA 41-21 win here. You don't know how many hoops I had to jump to watch this game. My
Mhm.
ESPN ran out. I refused to pay them. I took a little trip down to the stream and went eastward, if you know what I'm saying. But that one stopped working after a while. So then I got the sling pass, the day pass thing. Bro, it was just a lot just to watch this game. But anyway, I watched a lot of other games for that $5, so I guess it was worth it. This was the most complete UGA game I've seen out of UGA, both from an offensive and defensive standpoint. They let Mississippi State score on that first drive, and then that was pretty much it. UGA scored 38 unanswered points after that. Gunnar Stockton was in the driver's seat every time he was on the field, minus a lost fumble near the goal line, their first or second possession. Everything else just seemed perfect on the offensive side. On the defensive side, Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart, they were dialed in. They completely took away Mississippi State's running game, and they could not, Mississippi State, I mean, could not get anything going pass-wise after that. We mentioned, some of these quarterbacks getting benched. Blake Shapen, he got hurt at one point, but I'm pretty sure Kamario Taylor came in for him before that. He came in, and he provided some life for the offense, but all the points that Mississippi State scored after that 38-point run by UGA was pretty much garbage time. It was against third and fourth stringers. The game was pretty much put away at that point. Gunnar Stockton, he went 18 for 29, 264 yards, 3 touchdowns. Great game by him. Very serviceable. I want to highlight the true MVP of this game. MVP and most improved, I think, to me, that was Nate Frazier, running back for UGA. He had a career high 181 yards and a touchdown on just 12 carries. He started the second half with a 59-yard touchdown that just completely demoralized Mississippi State and turned a somewhat competitive game into a blowout and kind of a no chance of coming back. I think this was a great showing by UGA once again, and it provides a good amount of relief and motivation that, hey, this team can put together a full game, which they're going to need. They got a big game against apparently a top 10 team against Texas next weekend.
Yeah, man, looking forward to it. Hey, we're at that point in time in the season where these matchups are straight up playoff implications.
Yeah.
If you lose this late in the season, it could be detrimental to your chances of making the college football playoffs.
Yep.
All righty. So yeah, let's talk about the next game that we, had highlighted as a deep dive, and that was, number 7 BYU going to number 8 Texas Tech. Texas Tech ended up winning this one 27-9, and what a huge game it was for Texas Tech, here against BYU. They were out here hunting for bear meat, and it was bear hunting season.
They were cooking them.
Yeah. So speaking of Bear Bockenmeyer, yeah, he couldn't deal with the physicality of the Texas Tech defense, right?
Yeah.
You had interceptions, you had fumbles, you had terrible third down efficiency. You name it, the Texas Tech defense caused it for Bear.
Mm-hmm.
The 7 points that BYU was able to score was, kind of in garbage time. The game was already put away. BYU, they relied heavily on good run game, but Texas Tech and their defensive front, led by Jacob Rodriguez, they were absolutely shutting down the Big 12's leading rusher, LJ Martin. They held him to just 35 yards on 10 carries, so they knew exactly where to focus. Offensive MVP for this game wasn't Baron Morton. It was actually the kicker for Texas Tech, Stone Harrington, for the Red Raiders. He had 5 field goals, which is a new school record, by the way. You do the math, 5 times 3. He contributed to 15 points for the team. So that means, the offense, they really only scored 14 points. So he scored more than the whole offense.
Damn, one-man army.
Yeah. Hey, those clutch situations where you get into the red zone or field goal position, they matter.
I always say winners can win the game for you, but they can't lose the game for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely can see that there, yeah. So now Texas Tech is, at the top of the Big 12. And the reason I'm so happy for this is because we called it. We called it at the beginning of the season. They were our dark horse, and they're continuing to show like, hey, they're going to be a team that could make some noise in the college football playoff.
Yep, for sure. That was a good game to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We had at 3:30, we had number 9 Oregon at number 20 Iowa. This was a very low scoring game, 18-16. It required a last second really field goal. But we did like just like we called Texas Tech as a Big 12 champion. We called that this game was going to be a slugfest. We called that this was going to be a low scoring affair. That rain and weather definitely was a factor here. We saw a pause. We saw a lot of slippery balls and bad throws here. But Oregon, they were able to out Iowa. They ran 261 yards on the ground against an Iowa team that typically only gives up less than 84 rush yards per game. So 3 times as many yards as they typically do. Oregon's a pretty balanced offense, so the fact that they were able to run that many yards didn't surprise me, but they were able to do it better than Iowa, who prides themselves in how they run the ball. Noah Whittington, that was the player we mentioned in our kind of preview. We said that he would have to have an explosive game or at least a couple of explosive runs in order for Oregon to kind of break this Iowa game plan. He had a long rush of 27, but he was able to get 118 yards on 17 carries, which is about 7 yards per carry. Similar to the Penn State Indiana game, the underdog had the lead with under 2 minutes left in this game. So Iowa was able to get they were able to go down 93 yards for a go-ahead touchdown, and it seemed like the Oregon season was pretty much on the line. They hadn't been scoring, obviously with a low-scoring game, they hadn't been scoring like that the entire game, especially now with 2 minutes left. But, good players make good plays. Dante Moore, who was struggling most of the day, he showed his clutch gene and went 5 for 7 on 47 yards for the final 54-yard drive. He was able to get his team within the field goal range, and then kicker Atticus Sappington was able to get the 39-yard game-winning field goal in Iowa City. Credit to Iowa's defense, though. They did everything humanly possible to win this game. They held a top 10 offense who is very balanced, like I mentioned. Not thinking about the rain or anything like that, but they're top 10 in balance and through the air, on the ground. But they were able to just keep them to one touchdown, only 18 points. But the margins are so thin against elite teams, you can't just give them points, right? They had the safety that they gave up 2 points early in the game was a result of a bad snap, slippery balls, like I mentioned. That was a critical 2-point swing that changed the game, changed the entire game. Oregon only won by 2, so who knows what that the butterfly effect of that. The fact of the matter is, the Hawkeyes have now lost 12 straight games to ranked opponents, and they've just shown that they don't have the DNA to hang, and they can't close the deal against legit championship contenders. Oregon still has a couple rough games ahead of them. They have USC and Washington to end the season. It seems like the Big Ten might be figured out as to who's going to Indianapolis. I think we at least know one of the teams. But I think Oregon is still a solid playoff team.
Yep, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Moving on to our next game. You got Syracuse. They took on number 18 Miami this weekend, and boy, they took a butt whipping.
Yeah.
38-10, right? We didn't agree on this one initially when we were previewing, week 11, and it seemed like he might have been a little too aggressive on, Miami's demise, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's on me.
It's all good, this team, this game was a defensive struggle for the first 28 minutes of the game, right? The score was still 0-0. But then Miami, they scored 14 points in 23 seconds. One on a trick play touchdown, and the other on an immediate pick six. This completely took Syracuse out of the game mentally, and it gave Carson Beck the confidence and swagger. Right, he needed to finish up the game in a good way against Syracuse. This game also featured a big boy play. Offensive tackle Francis Mawiga. He scored a 3-yard touchdown on a reverse shovel pass.
We've been seeing a lot of big boy play. We've been seeing a lot of big boy plays this year. I like it. I love it.
I love it too. I mean, I don't know how they come up with these concepts and practices. Like, okay, we're gonna trust, our non-skilled players to be in the so where they have to handle, passes, shovel passes, and we're just gonna let them rumble in and try to score. So
it probably goes to how good football players are now that this Francis guy, he probably practiced that like just coming up. You know how like you know how like quarterbacks have to be dual threat now. Before we used to like give that title to people, but now quarterbacks have to be dual threat. Maybe offensive tackles now have to know how to run the ball and have ball security and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it just comes down to, at a certain point in time when you get the best playing in these on these top teams in the nations, they're athletes one way or another. Even though
Yeah,
they're big in stature and size, everybody it all comes down to athleticism. That's what separates you, I think.
yeah,
Um, yeah. Shout out to Carson Beck. He reached 10,000 career passing yards in this game. So pretty great college career for him.
yeah.
Different dynamic than we've seen before for, quarterbacks in the past who've completed this milestone just because of NIL, the transfer portal, but still shout out to him. I think Cristobal, he probably took this game a little personally as, Syracuse was kind of able to, end Miami's playoff dreams last year, right? So he made sure to put away, you know, the the doubt and fear throughout the game. He pulled out his gadget plays and trick plays in order to put Syracuse to bed, right? Um, but that offensive line, it was dead on arrival for this Syracuse game. Miami's defense, they recorded 7 sacks and two forced interceptions, right? So there was no way Syracuse was going to win this game with a performance like that on one side of the ball.
Mhm.
So yeah, it just got ugly fast.
Yeah.
Yep. Um, well, yeah. So we had some pretty good games, competitive games to watch too in week 11. But that pretty much wraps up our show for today. Um, Next, coming up on our show on Thursday, we're gonna discuss week 12 preview. We have some really good matchups. We got Texas going to Georgia, Oklahoma going to Alabama. You remember that crazy game last year.
Right.
Um, Iowa is at USC, and then you have UCLA at Ohio State. Could be a fun game. So we'll definitely see what happens.
Can't wait to do some
Um,
deep dives on these teams. See, there's got to be at least one upset. I don't. We didn't get too many this week. We got to get some upsets next week. Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, that's all for today. We will see you next time on First and Short.
Thanks, guys.